So everyone, welcome to this CONVERGE Virtual Forum focused on the 2025 Southern California Wildfires. My name is Lori Peak, and I'm a professor of sociology here at the University of Colorado Boulder, where I also serve as the director of the Natural Hazard Center and the leader of the National Science Foundation funded CONVERGE initiative.
Lafımı da
And
duymuştur belki ama yani
we wanted to acknowledge at the outset the funding from the National Science Foundation, which has made this virtual forum series possible. And we are grateful for this federal funding as well as for the 2.3 million federal employees in our government, and especially those who work in the hazard space doing this quiet, vital work to move hazards resilience forward. To begin, I just wanted to say a few more words about this virtual forum series. We actually established these virtual forums in 2019, soon after the CONVERGE initiative was funded. And really what motivated the establishment of these virtual forums was this recognized need to bring the research community, as well as those who support the research response, together in the aftermath of major disasters in order to encourage greater communication, coordination, and ultimately collaboration. And so during these forums, which we've held more than well over a dozen to date, we're really committed to listening to and learning from one another. While we also try to answer questions like, what data are truly perishable and must be collected immediately before they disappear? What safety protocols, ethical and cultural considerations, and other specificities do researchers need to be aware of before they launch studies? How can we work together to identify research priorities? And ultimately, how can we coordinate to lower the burden on affected communities as well as often overstretched response agencies while we're simultaneously enhancing the quality of our science and engineering studies? In this interest of communicating, coordinating, and collaborating, we wanted to encourage all of you to please visit this shared document that we've set up in response to the deadly and devastating 2025 Southern California wildfires. Jeffrey's going to put the link to the shared document into the chat. And we'd just like to ask anyone that has already launched a research project, might be planning a research study, might have resources to share, please visit that document so you can see what's already been shared up there and also share your own information. Now, on to the agenda for today, and we have another busy agenda. So first, I just want to acknowledge that this is actually the second forum in a series dedicated to these wildfires. 2 weeks ago to the date, we held the first session where we spotlighted several talented and dedicated researchers who wanted to share lessons learned from prior wildfire studies. In addition, we featured funders from the National Science Foundation as well as the National Institutes of Health. And we also learned from some of the National Science Foundation funded shared use facilities. Today, our purpose for this second forum dedicated to the Southern California wildfires is to first hear from established research coordination networks about studies they have launched or are planning to launch in the near term, to learn more about NSF-funded shared use resources. We're going to hear directly from several investigators who have launched or plan to launch research studies following these fires. And we also have a couple of special guests who have been leading an extraordinary long-term exposure study in the aftermath of the Maui fires, who are going to share with us some lessons learned applicable to the Southern California fires as well. And then all throughout, we're going to be trying to focus on what are the research priorities, what safety protocols, ethical protocols, cultural considerations, and so forth are the research teams thinking about and wanting to share. And then ultimately, again, hoping to connect members of this research community with one another. Please note this session is being recorded, and we will post any slides that are shared during this, the chat and Q&A, as well as the video recording soon after this session ends. And so with that, we're now going to turn to a couple of leaders from some of the major research coordination networks that have actually been stood up over the decades in the case of the Geotechnical Extreme Events Reconnaissance Network, as well as over the past several years in the case of these other 7 EERs that you see up there. The National Science Foundation and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have invested in funding these extreme events, reconnaissance, and research coordination networks so that we can do a better job of coming together within our disciplinary communities, but also in terms of working across disciplinary communities to share data, information, and to otherwise enhance the interdisciplinarity of the work that we are doing. And so with that, today, we're going to hear from one of the leaders of the Public Health Extreme Events Research Network about what they have planned in response to the Los Angeles fires. And then we're going to hear from a leader of the Geotechnical Extreme Events Reconnaissance Association. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now. And I've invited David Abramson from FEAR, if he would please lead us off during this virtual forum with just a couple of minute overview with what the Public Health Extreme Events Research Network is doing. So David, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Lori, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to such a wide and engaged network of folks. So FEAR is actually the newest kid on the block of these 7 EERs. We've been in existence for a bit over 2 years, initially funded by CDC. We currently have funding from the National Center for Disaster Medicine and Public Health. We have about 350 disaster researchers in our network, and they span the range of students who are in master's and doctoral programs, new investigators to very seasoned disaster scientists. We are led by 4 of us who are co-leads, I'm at NYU, David Eisenman at UCLA, Nicole Errett at University of Washington, and Jen Horney at University of Delaware. And we have a steering committee as well, and I even see some of the steering committees on the call. So what FEAR has done after the wildfires, first of all, we hosted our first call last week in essentially mobilizing our network. And I'm imagining that several or a number of you may have already been on that call and have heard what we were doing. When we think about mobilizing the network, we think of several different ways that we approach it, which is either virtually, looking at secondary data that we can assemble, or in mounting an actual field operation. And as we were thinking about the California wildfires and what we could do, we actually came up with a bit of a blended idea, which is using some of that secondary aspect of the virtual aspect, but also thinking about all the primary measurements that are occurring. We also knew that the area of Los Angeles has some significant research institutions there, especially UCLA and USC in particular. And so we were mindful that whatever we did, we also wanted to be able to be supportive to the researchers who are already spooling up their research efforts. So what we came up with was the creation of a baseline exposure map to serve as a geospatial platform for maintaining as much information as we can about a variety of environmental exposures that are geolocated and that can later be used by the research community to understand what sort of impacts were there between these environmental exposures and potential health effects. So we recognize that first of all, getting health data is a complicated thing, as those of you who get or work with that data know. And so we thought at the very minimum, we'll create this exposure map. And it would include everything from a very high level, maybe satellite data, down to airplane level data, drone level data, street level data, ground level data, eye-level data. I mean, we're just trying to capture and curate and collect all of the data that would otherwise be perishable. As so many of us know, if you don't get this exposure data in short order, it may be lost and not available for the kinds of inferential statistics that we would like to apply later. So we've actually begun, and we should be able to have our map up and running publicly in the next few days. It is built right now on CAL FIRE's DINS data, which is damage assessment data. Essentially, what we're doing is creating a sampling plan. There are about 750 census blocks that are covering both the Palisades and Eaton fire areas. About 20,000 houses in those two areas, and about 40% of them were damaged more than 50% or destroyed. And so what we're doing is we're using this as the base map to essentially sample a subset of census blocks. Each block has about 40 housing units in the census block. And that will be the scaffolding for all of the measures that we hope to add. So we are going to be working with the Rapid facility, who you'll be hearing from shortly, to collect data or to help capitalize on their expertise and on the instrumentation that they have. And we're also working with other teams that we've already been in contact with at USC and UCLA who are already collecting environmental data. The things we need to know, and pretty soon we're going to be sending out a request to our members. And here, let me put in the chat our website and also our email address. And so what we're looking for now is we need help assembling the minimum data set that we need to collect to know what is the minimum set of measures and sources of environmental toxins, contaminants, pollutants, hazards that we should be assessing immediately. So I mean, you could send us an email and say you'd like to be on our list. Better would be if you go to our website and join FEAR so that you can be a part of the regular emails that we send out to the membership. And then there'll be a form on there that allows you to input what you recommend as base minimum environmental measures, whether it's heavy metals, VOCs, PM 2.5, whatever. We're happy to hear all of your ideas as we assemble the map. All of the data we collect
Thank you, David.
One last thing,
Yeah.
all of the data we collect will be publicly available. So back to you, Lori.
Thank you, David, so much for that overview. And I know we have a lot of esteemed public health and environmental science researchers on here, and I see several of them are taking careful notes. So thanks for putting your email in there. The FEAR Network link is in the chat. And thank you so much for the mobilization you've already engaged in with this community. Next, we are going to turn to John Stewart from the University of California, Los Angeles, who's one of the leaders of the Geotechnical Extreme Events Research Association, and I believe his colleague Scott Brandenburg may be on here as well. But John, can you come off mute and turn your camera on so we can have a similar briefing about what GEAR has planned in the context of this event? Thank you again, David. And I hope John is on here. I actually don't see John or Scott. They may not be on here. I corresponded with them this morning, but they may be joining shortly. So I think what we will do while they are hopefully getting on here, we're going to go ahead and move to the next portion of this sharing. And so thank you again, David Abramson. And now we're going to hear from a couple of the leaders of the Natural Hazards Engineering Research Infrastructure, or NERI, facilities for the nation, which are funded by the National Science Foundation, and also the RAPID, which is co-funded by the National Institutes of Health. And so I'm going to stop sharing again, and we're going to hear just for a couple of minutes from Joe Wortman with RAPID, and then Tim Cockerell with Design Safe. And I know they're both on here. So Joe, would you like to take it away, please? Thank you.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Laurie. I had given a presentation on some of the RAPID resources and instrumentation that's available to the user community in the last meeting, so I'm not going to repeat that. I'm just going to give you a quick update on what we've been focusing on and then what is underway currently. We have been working to really try to understand and identify common geographic areas of interest to multiple research communities, with the idea that we could collect this data once and we could make it openly available and it could be shared among multiple groups. We've been asking groups for a tier 1 and a tier 2 area of interest, with tier 1 being the top priority. They really want to capture perishable data in those areas. And tier 2 is they would like to get it if that's possible. We've also been focusing on supporting the users that are in place and that are getting ready to deploy, and kind of getting them doing some training with them and so forth. I'm in Los Angeles right now, and we're going to be training a group this afternoon. We're teaching a short course on using Street View that was scheduled long before the fires, but we'll be training a group this afternoon who will be deploying, I think, beginning tomorrow to start collecting Street View. In terms of, in a sense of what's confirmed in our data collection, as I mentioned, there's a group that will be deploying, I think, to both of the fire areas to collect that Street View data. And the understanding is that may be longitudinal data, so there will be a baseline set, and there may be continued data collection to kind of look at the evolution and in recovery of those areas with time. I expect that we will also be potentially flying our fixed wing 5-camera drone system next week at Altadena, and potentially at the Palisades as well. It's unclear if we're going to do both of those, but that would enable us to develop very, very high resolution 3D models that you could estimate debris volumes and many other applications. And then finally, we're going to be deploying with our hyperspectral camera to look at some chemical signatures that are in the ash and burned material, and to see if those could be correlated to some sample measurements that are made at the building specific level. So those are a couple things that are underway right now. As always, if you want to contact us, please go to our website. It's uwrapid.org, and I'll put it in I think I did put it in the chat, and just click on contact, and our contact information is there. Probably best to go to our general contact information. It goes out to several of us rather than contacting me directly, because I'll be in Los Angeles for the next couple of days, but that's what's underway right now.
And Joe, while we have you up there, Kim asked a question about, you obviously mentioned the Altadena and the Palisades fires and the data collection there, but since there were many other fires that have been unfolding, are there any other planned efforts for different geographic regions that have been affected as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are, at this point, we are not planning to do that, only because we are at capacity with trying to fulfill the tier 2 request. And in some sense, those are what might also be more of along the lines of a tier 2/3. So again, we're really focusing on getting those top tier areas that several groups have said we really need the data here. If we have the capacity with time, I think we would expand that to some of the other fire areas. But right now, that's not in our, we're not planning on that for in the next week or two, at least.
Okay. Thank you, Joe, and thanks so much for joining us. And I know you are also a leader and member of GEAR, and I don't know if you're at UCLA right now, but if you have access to John Stewart or Scott Brandenburg, please let them know we're on.
Yeah, I am here. I'm trying to contact them right now. I'm actually not in the physical proximity to them, but I'm trying to reach out to them.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us again, and we'll repost the wonderful RAPID slides that you shared during the last session, so everybody has access to that overview as well. So thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn to Tim Cockerell. who is one of the co-PI of NERI Design Safe, and he's going to share some really important data resources for those of us in the research community. Tim, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori. And following Joe's lead, Ellen Rathje, Professor Ellen Rathje, who is the PI of Design Safe, presented at the last of these meetings. And so the slides are available, and Lori will be making those available. So I'm going to try and keep this brief so that you all can talk more about the research itself. We do provide wildfire research across, as has been added to the natural hazards portfolio of Design Safe and NERI. And so I just wanted to mention that we are active in that area for the past few years, and really we have data sets going back for a little bit. So I just want to highlight a couple things. There's our website. There's our URL for our website. You will be able to find previous support, previous data sets that have been made publicly available. I like to highlight that the left-hand navigation gets you access to all of the functional areas for doing computational and data work. We are backed by the Texas Advanced Computing Centers, which is an NSF-funded supercomputing center. We are backed by their massive HPC systems and data capabilities. Don't be intimidated by the word supercomputer, please. We support all levels of research, whether that's needing just a small amount of computational work, but having those data available to you publicly through Design Safe is what is really important here, and encouraging you to share your data as well. We have a lot of capabilities provided for both computation and data. You can download data, or you can work with it directly in our interface. And you can discover data through a couple of different means. We have our published data area, and we have a recon portal, which provides you with a map with locations of various natural hazards over the last many years that we have data available for. And these can be data that are either in Design Safe at TAC, or also we point to other data sets that are available external to us as well. For instance, with the Los Angeles fires, within Design Safe ourselves, we don't have any published data yet, but we are pointing to other data sets that are available for you. Lori mentioned that this is the NSF Natural Hazards Engineering Research Infrastructure Program, but please be aware that the word engineering, yes, that's the department or the division of NSF that's a part of, but we also have, through Lori's work, a lot of activity from the social sciences as well. If you have data that you would like to contribute, you can submit a ticket to us. Also note that we provide a lot of communication amongst the research community through our Slack team on Design Safe. And so we have a wildfire, the Los Angeles Wildfire channel dedicated to that. So if you're looking to communicate with other researchers as they go into the field and do reconnaissance, that's a great place to get involved. Here's what, if you look at just searching on wildfire in our published data sets, these are published data sets with digital object identifiers, DOIs. We already have, from previous work, 14 data sets available, and they're evenly split between the social sciences and the engineering, with a variety of topics covered that are valuable to this community. Just for reference, this is what a published data set looks like, but please go explore that yourself and spend some time looking at what's available to you in Design Safe. And we're always available. We have a team of people available to support and answer questions as well.
Thank you so much, Tim, for that overview. And again, we will definitely be posting these slides as a resource for the community. So thank you for joining us again for this session and sharing that information. And while we're on the National Science Foundation funded shared use resources, just wanted to put a shout out, especially to all those who may be new to rapid research in the aftermath of disaster, please know that we have 12 free online training modules focusing on a range of topics via the CONVERGE facility, again, focusing on everything from conducting emotionally challenging research to IRB, review procedures, to reciprocity in the context of this form of research. We also have over 40 extreme events research check sheets that are brief guidance documents focused on a range of topics to help researchers prepare for doing this kind of work and to ensure that it is properly shared. And then we also wanted to point you to this article that actually grew out of our training module on collecting and sharing perishable data. And Jeffrey's going to share the link for that in the chat, because we know that oftentimes when people are seeking support to do this kind of work, it's vitally important, as Joe was noting, to clarify what data are truly perishable and must be collected because of their time-sensitive nature. And so this article focuses on that. So with that, we are now going to turn to sort of part 3 of this particular virtual forum, which is focused on, again, that communication, coordination, and collaboration vision for these virtual forums. And so here is where we're going to hear from the investigators who filled out that shared spreadsheet that I shared at the beginning of this virtual forum. And so we're going to hear from some of the researchers who have already launched research in Southern California in response to one or more of these terrible fires. We're also going to hear from a few researchers who've been recently funded and thus are getting ready to launch, and then also from a few researchers who have studies planned. And I've asked each of these researchers to really stick to sort of 2 minutes, just giving the community a big picture overview of what it is that they are doing, again, for situational awareness, and then any extra time we have in this portion of the agenda. Anybody else who is out there on this call who wants to share or ask questions or seek possible collaborations, we'll use the time for that. So again, thanks to those who are going to share during this portion for really sticking to the 2 minutes so that we can hear from as many people as possible. And so with that, Sarah O'Connor from Cal State Long Beach, who I know has to teach right after this forum, she's going to lead us off and talk to us about a study that was actually funded through our Natural Hazard Center Quick Response Research Award Program and is already in progress. So Sarah, will you give us your brief overview of the project? Thank you.
Of course. Good morning and good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast. It's wonderful to meet all of you. So as Lori mentioned, my name is Sarah O'Connor. I'm the Associate Director of the Geospace Lab, which is Geospatial Analysis for Community Engagement at Cal State Long Beach. And I am working with 2 other investigators, Steve Jensen and Shirley Feldman Jensen, also at Cal State Long Beach. They're actually at the National Academy of Sciences meeting this morning, but they say hello to everybody. And so I'm also happy to report in Southern California, we are currently experiencing a very light rain, which is really nice. So we're really happy about that given recent events. So we actually applied for research from the research funding from the Hazard Center in the wake of the Franklin fire to look at, so my co-investigator described our research a bit last time, looking at community engagement and fire response with a particular focus on staying defenders. Since that time, my co-investigators worked very closely with the community to develop a community response apparatus known as the Malibu Community Fire Brigade. And so we were going to look at specifically the role of cognition in their very successful Franklin fire response. And then the Palisades fire happened. And so we are extending that analysis through to the current day. And also we're looking at the impact of the community fire brigade by doing a comparative analysis with the outcomes in Malibu and right next door in Palisades, which experienced the same fire event. I also just want to add very quickly, as I mentioned, my co-investigators have been working very closely with this community, as have I, for a long time now. You know, we started this research back after the Woolsey fire. And so that being said, we're actually doing a couple of additional studies because with some of the data that the community brigade aggregated, because they are important to the community brigade to understand this information about how they were deployed, outcomes for the different activities they engaged in. This is a community that has gone through a lot and they need a lot. So I highly encourage anyone that is working in this space to really talk to the community about what it is they can learn from your research and maybe direct your research towards meeting their needs. And with that, I'll pass it on.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And Jen Tobin, if you wouldn't mind pasting into the chat the award link for Sarah's project and also the link for their prior report on the community response and the mitigation brigades. So that would be great. And thank you, Sarah, for that overview. And now we are going to turn to Julie Dinesquay from Scripps to talk about her project that she's leading. Thank you, Julie.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everybody. So a little bit different aspect. We're looking at the environmental aspect here. We are moving offshore. So I'm a marine biologist at Scripps, and I'm focused on the impact of atmospheric deposition in the ocean health. So as a strong Santa Ana wind pushed away this huge fire plume, we had crews at sea at the same time that was coincidentally there doing a survey that they are doing every winter. And they started to witness the ash deposition on the surface of the ocean. So like very large ash particle, a lot of ash, all the way up to 100 miles offshore. So they had the capacity to ramp up sampling. So they collected more and more samples and they went back a few days later also on site. So they were exactly there when the big ash plume came and then came back a week later. And then thanks to NIR, and thank you so much, Britt, but we had the capacity also to ramp up our close to shore sampling. And so we are now monitoring in collaboration with all the sanitation districts in LA, monitoring the continuous impact on the ocean ecosystem. And so our goal is to continue this short to hopefully long-term monitoring on the impact on the surface ocean, to be able to characterize the composition of this deposited ash. We're also going to do modeling of the spread of this ash plume and its deposition in the ocean, and hopefully we can also help inform air quality with these models. So we hope to inform like water quality, air quality with our sampling. And just to mention that this is also becoming a very large project. And there is also a much larger multi-agency effort to really like look at the impact of this fire on the whole watershed at large. So we are just a little piece of this. Thank you.
Okay. Julie, thank you. And if you wouldn't mind, and same to Sarah, dropping your emails in the chat. And to everybody on this forum, if you have questions or follow-up for the folks you're hearing from, please do use the chat for that. So thank you so much. Now we're going to turn to Kevin Riley and John Stewart. I see you. I will get you in a couple of people. Thanks for jumping on here. We're actually turning to your colleague right now at the University of California, Los Angeles. Kevin, could you go ahead and give us your 2-minute update on the project that you're leading with others? Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Lori. It's really nice to be here today. I appreciate the space. My name is Kevin Riley. I direct a center here at UCLA called LOSH, the Labor, Occupational Safety and Health Program. We're part of the public health school here. We also have a relationship with the UCLA Labor Center. And our focus is primarily on health and safety of workers, writ large. We've been doing some grant-funded work this last year and a half or so, looking at the working experiences and health exposures for migrant workers who are often pulled into these disaster events, either as the disasters are unfolding or soon afterwards to do, cleanup work, hired often by homeowners or small contractors to go in and, clean up properties soon after a wildfire or a flood or a storm. And to engage in the sort of rebuilding efforts. So we've been doing that work for already several years. And of course, now with the recent fires, we're looking to pivot our grant activities to focus on kind of the real-time experiences of these workers who are already now going into the wildfire impacted areas and cleaning up homes and businesses. The work that we're doing, we're really hoping to kind of capture several different dimensions of it. I mean, part of it is looking at the health exposures. What kinds of tasks are people being asked to do on those properties? what sorts of exposures to VOCs and to particulate matter and chemicals and other sorts of things on those properties. So, doing some environmental sampling, doing some personal monitoring, but also documenting, the nature of the employment as well, because often that work is very informal. These are folks who are hired at street corners or Home Depots, can be hired in these very informal ways. And that, of course, starts to undermine the legal protections they may have when they're doing that work. So the partners that we're working with are very interested in sort of using this also as a way to think about, what sort of policy changes are needed to ensure that these workers who we know are doing a lion's share of this recovery work also have the sort of protections that they might need. So a lot of moving parts right now. We're sort of in the midst of conversations at this moment, figuring out how to transition our efforts to really look at those questions. In closing, I'll just maybe put out an ask or an interest. I'm super interested to connect with anyone who might be doing projects that are similarly engaging with the kind of recovery workforce, and not so much on the formal side, because I think there's a lot of attention to, the firefighters and to some extent the kind of more formal government agencies that are doing some of the initial work. But if anyone's sort of thinking about that other much bigger and often more informal recovery workforce, I'd be really interested to connect with folks, because I think it's a huge component of the work that's going to be happening. From an occupational health perspective, I'm just really interested to sort of understand what's going on and to sort of support efforts where we're sort of looking at exposures there and finding strategies to protect those workers as well. So I'll stop there, but thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Kevin. And it sounds like there is a lot of great synergy between what you're doing and the FEAR network is proposing. And thank you so much for the focus that you're bringing to this from really ground zero. Thank you. Now we're going to turn to Matthew Palm and his team at Matthew's at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, but has many collaborators from across the nation. And Matthew, if you are on here, could you flip on your camera and mic right now? I think he was going to be on here. And if not, Jen, would you send Tara? I know you're one of the collaborators with Matthew Palm. Jen, would you maybe send Matt an email real quick to see if he's going to jump on here? And Tara, I know you were also on the project that Matthew was going to speak to, but you were going to speak to another project. And so would you like to speak to the other project? We'll see if we can get Matt on here. And if not, we might have you do double duty if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. And I'm just going to share my screen if that works, just because if anybody else is like me and does better with visuals, not just audio stuff. Thanks, everybody. Tara Goddard. I'm at Texas A&M, but I am from California. And I also just want to say I'm really sorry and thinking of all of you who have been personally affected. My cousins actually lost their home in the Altadena fire, but thankfully got out safely. So just very briefly, my colleague Amy Lee, who's a postdoc at UCLA, and I have been planning this study where it builds on a previous study that I did funded by the Natural Hazard Center, looking at the transportation agencies and the evacuation of non-drivers. So I like to just always remind us that 20 to 30% of people in communities are non-drivers, whether it's age, disability, health conditions, poverty, car ownership, or choice. And there's probably some groups I left out. And historically, transportation agencies and staff haven't always viewed themselves as part of these systems, or others in emergency management haven't really thought of them as part of that. And so there's very few emergency plans that specifically speak to transit and paratransit, and paratransit is the parallel service to transit mandated by the American with Disabilities Act to provide for people with disabilities. And also, I think there's an open question that LA could be really an interesting case of, it's largely, we think of transit when it is an evacuation as reactive or serving existing riders and captive users, and Matt will jump on and talk about our study of the users and the riders, but also can it be used proactively, right? Transit can move a lot of people quickly. That's one of the benefits of it, much more so than vehicles. And of course, we've seen the viral videos and photos out of the Los Angeles fires with dozers having to push vehicles that had to be abandoned as people had to literally run for their lives, but then we're in the way of first responders. And then on the bottom, there's just a banner from LA Metro. So this study that we are about to apply for funding, we have not yet. So CAL FIRE produces really nice demographics on these wildfires. If you haven't seen them, really nice PDFs. And so they have these, what they call at-risk populations. So just in the Eaton and the Palisades, and yes, I saw it in the chat, people have talked about there are additional fires as well, like the Castaic, and I'm blanking on the other names. But just in these two alone, over 13,000 households with someone with a disability, over 40,000 with an older adult, and over 5,700 with no vehicle at all. Very complex region, just bus and rail, 46 providers, plus the city has responsibilities for this, the county, there's nonprofits, including Access, which provides, Access is the name of the group that does the paratransit in the region. And so our focus is really looking at the agency professionals, and so the decision making, this idea, this kind of the theoretical backing of work is imagined versus work is done, or what Ostrom calls rules in form versus rules in use. So folks who do org psych or this kind of thing that would be interested in talking, or you're doing studies in this area, I'd love to talk with you and share resources. And so we're going to be looking, doing interviews, hopefully with staff. I'm in talk with some folks at Metro now. Certainly if anybody on this call is at Metro and wants to talk more, please let me know. But what plans and protocols were in place? How did the response work well? What were some of the challenges, and what can we learn, both LA going forward for future disasters, and of course, these very big events that are on the horizon with the World Cup and the Olympics, but then of course for other agencies and regions. So that's the plan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tara, and thanks for the work you and Amy are proposing and for this call for collaboration. We are really grateful. And I think I'm going to go ahead and turn to John Stewart right now. John, would you give us a couple of minutes on what GEAR has planned and it's already doing in response to this, to the fires? Thank you.
Yeah, and sorry for not being here earlier. I had thought this was at 11. I think we had a time zone issue where it was 11 Mountain Time, but not 11 Pacific Time. But anyway, I'm here now.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm here, as you said, representing GEAR, Geotechnical Extreme Events Reconnaissance. I was at a meeting of this group maybe 2-3 weeks ago, something like that, when we hadn't done any work yet. So what GEAR does, and it's kind of its reason for existence, is after extreme events to collect and disseminate perishable data. So data that is there after the event and may not be there a few months later. And in this particular case, what makes the data perishable is rain, first of all, and rain also makes it an ongoing challenge, because what is a fresh observation right after the fires becomes a different type of fresh observation after a major rainstorm, like we're actually having right now. So collecting that data at different points in time and then disseminating it over Design Safe so that the research community can use it. We've partnered on different things with Scripps, and we're just beginning to talk to NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. I actually owe them a phone call. This is all very dynamic, so they just reached out to me this morning. NIST did. They are going to send a fire team, and we're going to see if there's opportunity for some sort of collaboration there. I wrote here deployment challenges and strategies. So the challenge for most of the time since January 7th, when this whole thing started, was that you had an ongoing, hazard, of course, for a while, and there were flight restrictions, and there were all these issues. You couldn't get in there, you couldn't fly over it. As time goes on, those challenges change, and we, as I'll show in a minute, we were able to get a flight up, or I should say Scripps was able to get a flight up at the end of January. But access restrictions remain. So there's still National Guard, there's still the sheriff, there are checkpoints, you can't just drive in there. And so at what point can you get in? So that there's that whole issue of can you get in, while at the same time you're trying to get in to collect this perishable data, and you're trying to do it before major storms arrive. So the sweet spot for us in trying to get some boots on the ground was actually just in the last few days, because 100% containment for Palisades and Eaton was achieved at the end of last week. The access has been fluid, so the mayor actually opened everything up and then she closed it back down again. But we went through a process with some help from my colleague here at UCLA, Sriram Naraswamy, who has connections with the city of LA, and we were able to get access yesterday, which is before the storm that came in last night. And I'll show you where those teams went. So it's a start. It's by no means comprehensive, but it's a start. So what I've just described is some of the challenges, but also the strategy in trying to really think about when is the right time to go in. And so we thought the right time for initial scoping anyway was yesterday, actually. This slide is just about the flight. So two flights were done on January 24th and 25th for the two fire areas, Palisades and Eaton. The other fire areas weren't flown, at least by this group. So this was done by the Air Sea Interaction Lab at Scripps. They were in close coordination with various UCLA faculty. The main person doing that was Timu Galeen in my department. In the last meeting that I attended of this group, I was trying to see if I could come up with funding for this flight, but ultimately the Scripps crew decided to just self-fund it out of their discretionary funds. So the equipment they used is described at this website. I won't really go through that in the interest of time, and I'll just kind of list these things that are collected in their flight. So there's LiDAR and there's other things. It's pretty high resolution data. It's higher resolution, for example, than the USGS flight that had happened close to that time. And importantly, the team has agreed to make this data available to the public, and they're starting to talk about how to get this out via a data paper. So that's a win, because those flights happened before the last round of rain, which was the first rain since the fire. So the fact that they were able to get up and do that before that rain was really valuable and important. Now we're having the second round of rain, which is more intense. And we got the on-the-ground visuals before that happened. Now, what I have here is just some screenshots of Google Maps, just to show you where the teams went yesterday. So they were mainly focused on two areas, one of which is this Castle Mare area that is, and also up through here. And these areas were targeted because, first of all, there's a lot of retaining structures and known landslide problems before the fires happened. There were also quite a few reports of broken water pipes and landslide problems before the rains. And so we really wanted to try to see if we could understand what type of ground failure was going on there. And so some work, as I say, was done in this area. There was also some driving along the PCH and sort of imaging that area. That colleague Sriram had also done that with a 360 camera a few weeks before. So I think we have pretty good coverage of this area. And then a second team went to Mandeville Canyon. So if you're familiar with LA, this is 405 going over Sepulveda Pass. This is UCLA. Brentwood, part of Brentwood is here. And this is the fire that happened on the Friday of that week when everything was going crazy. The main fire started on a Tuesday. This one was on Friday and was burning in this area. It could have been really, really bad had it made its way down into Brentwood and over the hill into Encino. But because the winds weren't too bad and there was a very strong firefighter response, they got it under control. But from a science point of view, there's burned areas and there's unburned areas. That's a ripe area for debris flows. And so the team that went in here was basically sampling ash and doing infiltration tests in both burn areas and non-burn areas to have sort of a pre-rain data set that they can then see how it's changing over time after the fire. So that was kind of their focus. And some work of that sort was also done, I should have mentioned, back in the Palisades area that I referred to earlier. Again, the kind of ash sampling and infiltration tests. This sort of information is relevant for debris flow modeling. So that's why they were getting that. And so that's all I have to say for now. Obviously, it's still fluid. Restrictions to go in are very much still in place, but again, with the city of LA's help and Sriram's help, we now have passes. So we have the ability to come and go pretty freely, as long as, you know, we have 2 passes, so we have 2 vehicles that can go in. That will probably change over time. And as we discover more what's going on, we may find that we need lots of boots in the ground, in which case we would issue a broader call. We're not there yet because of the access restrictions. So I think I'll just leave it at that. That's our current status.
Thank you so much, John. And if you would be willing to email me those slides, we are going to post the slides after this. And thank you for joining us and for the work that you and your GEAR colleagues are doing. And John, if you also wouldn't mind putting your email in the chat. And now we are going to turn this over to Ruben Juarez and Alika Manaquea, who have been leading this really extraordinary Maui wildfire exposure study. And I asked them if they would just take a couple of minutes during this forum to introduce us very briefly to the Maui WES as it is known, and also to make any brief observations about things learned in Maui that may be applicable to the California context. So Ruben, over to you, and thank you again for joining us.
And I'm just going to start really quick, just introducing the study, and then Alika is going to jump later on. But yeah, thank you again for letting us share the work. More importantly, we're here to support anyone who wants and is interested to learn more. So, you know, one key lesson that we learn is when people are struggling with housing, jobs, and food security, health is not their priority. And this is obviously, this shouldn't be. So what we are doing here is creating a study of 2,000 individuals to assess physical and mental health issues, access to care, housing, jobs, and food security, and inform with this data policymakers in the state. So this is a truly community academic partnership launched to support the wildfires. We started with fast funding from local organizations, and then later on, NIH and the state of Hawaii came in to fund a small portion of it. We're still underfunded though. And our research involves surveys, health screenings, biospecimen collections, which includes urine, blood, saliva, to examine stress response, inflammation, environmental exposures. To date, almost 2,000 individuals have participated. Actually, we're closing the open enrollment this weekend. We're going to be reaching 2,000. For many of them, they are receiving the first medical screening since the fires, actually. And some of the key findings are on our website. Some of the key findings are on the website, but they include mental and physical health issues. And, you know, for instance, 52% of individuals had depressive symptoms when we were expecting about 30% for the Maui population pre-wildfires. There were moderate to severe anxiety for about 30% of individuals, and then 4% had suicidal thoughts. Access to care was another of the issues. You know, we had respiratory issues as well, high blood pressure by 74% of the individuals who came to the study, as well as mild to severe lung obstruction for 40% of individuals. And then economic hardship, loss of income, struggle accessing to care, food insecurity were another of the social aspects. And then some of the recent analysis that we just finished analyzing thanks to some of the samples we collected, it's testing for heavy metal contaminants. So 20% of individuals came out high for high levels of arsenic, lead, or other heavy metals that have been implicated in the ash. So, and you know, I'm just gonna just tell you some really broad, quick lessons is that, building a study like this takes time. So we were able to start within 6 months, thanks to the community and support that we had from them. But it really, from experiences of other disasters, it typically takes longer than that. Community trust is essential. People rely on local groups over government agencies for many of the situations when the disaster happens. So having a really good community grounded partnerships with the people who are supporting the survivors is key. And early screenings and interventions, in our case, are providing critical long-term health for individuals in the fires. This is the area that was affected in Hawaii. It's an area that was completely underserved. The closest medical facility is an hour away. So it's a completely different, from LA. So Alika, anything else that you want to add?
Yeah, and just kind of to add on a little to what Ruben mentioned, some of the lessons learned. We're still in looking at more of the data, again, from the exposures and the health impacts that are ongoing, and of course the long-term impacts that we're kind of focused on to mitigate and hopefully prevent some of the onset of these trajectories that are affecting individuals in our community. But I think the most pressing thing was really understanding that there was an immediate need even before the fires happened in Lahaina and Kula on Maui, in terms of addressing health disparities that have been persisting in the community. And we found for sure in our data, what we expected to see, unfortunately, was that those that had these pre-existing vulnerabilities were more at risk for some of these more severe conditions in the aftermath of the fires due to exposures. And so we're again, trying to message to our community as they're returning back to their homes or their properties to rebuild about potential persisting issues that they might be exposed to that haven't quite gotten cleaned up in the aftermath. And that's something that we're again really concerned about. Even trace amounts of these exposures can, in particular, vulnerable individuals can have these longer term effects, which we're trying to mitigate here. And it's a lot more complicated that we don't have much time to explain. But if anyone's interested in doing that kind of research in the field with community partners and addressing some of these early and long-term health needs in those communities that have been affected, we're here to support that work and provide as much lessons learned as we can, and also learn from you in this experience. And hopefully, we can mitigate not only future disasters, but even this one now, mitigate, some of the potentially increased mortality as a result of exposures in the future. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ruben and Alika, for joining us. And I think as we draw this to the close at the top of the hour, I think your words are so beautiful and well received. And again, just in this interest of learning across disasters, learning from one another, so we can ultimately ensure that all of this research is applied for the benefit of the people who have been affected, lest we never lose sight of that. And so with that, I want to really thank everyone who joined today. Thank you for those who shared during the virtual forum. Thank you for those who contributed in the chat. Thank you for those of you who've already launched these studies, who are thinking about them. And thank you for never losing sight of the power of this research and the impact that it can have on hopefully speeding a just and equitable recovery in the context of these fires. And also, again, as Alika said, ensuring that we're learning so that we reduce the harm and suffering from future disasters. And so with that, thank you to everyone. A special call out to those of you who are not in your homes right now. I'm looking at one of them right now on my screen. Because of these horrible fires, we are thinking of you, and we're thinking of all of the millions of people who've had their lives so badly disrupted in this event, as well as so many others. Thank you for the work you do. Please remember to take care of yourself and others, and we will get this recording posted as soon as possible, as well as the slides. Thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of your day. Bye. Thank you.